Welcome to a Hero's Welcome podcast, where stories, healing, and culture meet. Every episode, we invite you to listen, reflect, and be curious.
This podcast is a space for mental health therapists where we talk about the real work of healing.
Whether you're a mental health professional, a proud geek, or somewhere in between, you're in the right place.
So let's jump in.
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of a Hero's Welcome podcast. I'm your co-host, Maria LaCare Diego, and today I am joined by my lovely co-host.
That's me. I think that's me, Liliana Balin. And we are here with a special guest. So before we start, and I introduced you, we were started by saying how this idea of the podcast actually surfaced when we were in a table in community with him. So, yes. Robert, how would you like to introduce yourself to all our listeners?
I'll just introduce myself as Dr. Robert Jason Grant to the listeners. And yeah, almost a year ago, right? We were at this business of therapy training, sitting at the same table.
Yeah.
And this idea manifested for you all.
Yeah.
And look what you've done with it. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so cool.
I was waiting. Everyone who's listening, I was waiting for Robert to say, like, they will not shut up. They will start on and on. But thank you. So kind.
Yes, I think that's awesome. And I'm glad to be here. Happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to say Robert, and then there's like this internal dialogue that is happening in my mind. So should I say Dr. Robert all the time? Should I say?
No, no, you could just say Robert's fine.
Thank you. Thank you for
people call me all kinds of things.
Yes.
They call me Robert. Some people call me Jason.
Oh.
They just go there, which is totally okay. Some people just go with the initials. They'll just call me RJG. And some people call me Dr. Grant. But my brain answers to all of these things equally. So
for everyone who's listening, he's a doctor. Give him the credit, okay? He went back to school.
Oh, I don't need the credit. It's okay.
So what are we going to talk about today, Robert?
A great topic. Really, we're going to talk about neurodivergence, but specifically being neurodivergent as a professional, especially in our field, in our work as mental health professionals. But that presentation, I guess, if you will, I'm a mental health professional, or, other helping professionals, this would apply to as well.
Yeah.
And I'm also neurodivergent myself, what that means and what that can look like, the benefits, the cool things about it, maybe some of the challenges that come along with that as well.
Yeah.
I love that. I think in just my own experience with you, like you're known in the play therapy realm, right, for neurodivergence and trainings and education and being such a resource for that.
Yeah.
But I think this is a really important conversation to have as we are either late in life finding out or late in life accepting and owning that part of our identity. And I still feel like it's that kind of tricky line that we walk, right? Of like, I'm a professional in a helping field. And also these parts of me are true too, because I think there's still a stigma around a diagnosis as a professional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think when you are at my age, which I won't reveal, then you're definitely probably late diagnosed like I was as an adult, because the processes when I was a kid were pretty abysmal in terms of awareness. And we didn't even have neurodivergent language then. And so I didn't really understand me until I was an adult and didn't get a official, formal diagnosis that put me in a neurodivergent category until I was an adult. And so much of this work for me started then. And I remember when I have sensory processing disorder, plus a few other um, oddity things in the neurodivergent world. But that's probably the main one I identify with. And I remember when I got that diagnosis as an adult, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't put that in my bio. I didn't advertise that. I didn't even tell family members because there was still sort of this kind of shame associated with it. There
Mhm.
was a little bit of internalized ableism, like I should keep this to myself. And I think it was a mix of those beliefs, that I had taken on myself. And then also, like, if I say this, will people, treat me differently? Will they treat me even like I'm more weird than I already am, but not in a good, weird way? Um, so it was really when let's give credit to the actual autistics who really brought neurodiversity to the forefront. And when I started discovering them, talking about that I started working on this within myself to get to a place where it's like, yeah, I mean, this is my identity and I want to live this identity.
Yeah.
And it was really listening to so many of them, watching them, talking to them, reading their works that really helped me get to this place where I could finally. I remember the first time I just even put that I'm neurodivergent on my bio. It felt so strange, but so happy
Yeah.
at the same time. So, yeah, there's definitely this historic context, but then we still, like you mentioned, Maria, still today, you know, even though we're so much stronger as a community, we can still run into ableism or discrimination
Mhm.
or just some kind of weirdness that somebody else puts on us because, we are putting our identity out there.
Mhm. Yeah. I love that, right? And even I just heard Marshall. Marshall always talks about, um, and he was in an early podcast with us, but he was talking about like the parts that we hide because they're not welcome, or coming from a generation that told us we have to hide those parts because they were not welcome. And even as you were talking, I keep thinking, and they're still not welcome. They're welcome at a convenience. They're welcome at a price. If I can use you, then I welcome you. It sounds so dark when I say it out loud.
Mhm.
And I give myself permission to be okay with this, but
Yes.
it is true. Is if there's a benefit of me able-bodied to use you, I welcome you and embrace you. But if
Yeah.
there's not, then there's shame that comes with, because how come you cannot behave? How come you cannot do this? Like in that stereotypical able. And I think the scary part for all of us in this field is that we have the tools to help our clients, but we're very judgmental with each other. Is that okay that
Mhm.
I name that out loud?
Yeah.
I think it's authentic, Lilian. I think that that's been your experience too in circles. I mean, we've shared similar experiences in similar circles. A couple things came up when you were talking, Robert. One was this reminds me back when, we weren't allowed to be open about having our own mental illness or being on medications, right? For
Mhm.
ADHD, depression, anxiety, postpartum, whatever. This feels similar in line, and it also seems very much in line with the conversation around dynamic disabilities and invisible illnesses, specifically in play therapy, feeling as though if you can't physically get on the floor, then you can't be a play therapist.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you're seeing any similarities in our profession around being a neurodiverse provider.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're both were sharing what you said, I thought, well, this is diversity work in general, right? You always have this awareness that comes to the forefront, which is necessary. And then you always have the group, well, you have the group that deny it regardless. They're not interested. They're always going to be the haters.
Mhm.
But then you have this group that takes it on as a performative act, which is
Yes.
kind of what Liliana was talking about. And then you have the group that actually like cares about diversity and seeks it out
Mhm.
because they value, and
Yeah.
it's not just for a performative piece.
Yeah.
So you always kind of run into these three groups, right? When you're putting yourself out there in any form or type of diversity, and you're, I guess, as prepared as you can be to experience these three types of people
Yeah.
as you run into them. And I'm not sure how better that's going to get, in society. It seems like I would like to believe that it's going to get better,
Yep.
but it's not gotten better in thousands of years. So, you just kind of always have this manifestation. But the good thing is focusing on the people who get it
Mhm.
and not focusing on the other groups, right? That's the part that keeps us encouraged and keeps us believing, okay, this is so worthwhile, even though we encounter this ableism or this performative person.
Mhm.
We know there are authentic people out there that are really transformed
Yeah.
and really value what we're bringing and understanding neurodivergence and caring about it. Um, and also the piece, especially with neurodivergence, I think, is just like what happened to me
Mhm.
is you are speaking to another neurodivergent person who is yet to really fully realize that about themselves. And you're helping open that door for them.
Mhm.
And I think that is huge.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I think, it goes along with that marginalized, population experience, right? That it can be difficult, but it takes just a few really brave, really thick-skinned with good support people to stand there and go like, this is okay. You can be both. To let other people having that shared experience go, oh, maybe I can do both. I don't
Yes.
have to be alone in this, because it can feel very alone, especially if you're surrounded by the other groups of people, the
Yes.
performative or the haters. Um, and just being able to find someone else as an example, as like that beacon of hope and light can be really, really, really important.
Yeah, I would say, on this topic, it probably is very helpful for most neurodivergent professionals to find community with other neurodivergent professionals.
Yeah.
Mhm.
People maybe in person, it could be colleagues, it could be an online group or groups, but just to get community with others that are kind of in the same position as you,
Mhm.
because I think that makes a huge difference. Because you are going to encounter things that are not positive. You're going to run into this, and it helps you to navigate those things. It certainly has me when you do have a good community of fellow
Mhm.
neurodivergent professionals
Yeah.
that you talk with, interact with, hang out with, do life with.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Because I think it's important to share what's worked, right? Share those resources, share those support people. I'm just even thinking back to Liliana and I, like, when we started sharing our own, chronic illness and invisible illnesses, it was like, hey, do you know about this particular heating pad? Did you know that I have one that it sits in my suitcase and it always travels with me? Right? Just like those helpful hints, or like, hey, I was also in that situation. This person at this place was really helpful in helping me navigate that system. And so I'm hearing some similarities with that, and having that community can be really helpful because we are working in larger systems with overseeing governing bodies that don't always make it easy for us to navigate when we are other abled.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. The benefits are pretty numerous, really. I mean, there's also just the friendship and the relationship and the fun. For me, there is just a level of natural unmasking that can take place when I'm with a fellow neurodivergent friend or colleague. That's really nice. I certainly have neurotypical friends, and I have some neurotypical friends I can be pretty much myself with,
Yeah.
which is great. But there is a level of understanding, when you're with someone who has just dealt with a lot of the same things that you have and navigated life this kind of the same way that you have. That's just really, you need to have that in there somewhere in the mix of your community because it's a different level and it's an important level. And I think it's part of what helps keep you going when you are in those days or moments where everything is heightened because you're neurodivergent and you really are feeling how the systems aren't designed for you. And you've really encountered that ableist behavior from someone. It just, you got to be able to go to those people who are like, I've been there, I get it, I've lived it, I feel it with you. And that's just a special place to have.
So as all of you are preparing, I'm assuming, I'm making the assumption for a lot of you are preparing to go to conferences and the play therapy conference is coming up, right? Which is find your people to help you regularly co-regulate. Conferences give me so much anxiety. There's so much stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
So much stimulation. And you are required to participate in order to be part of and not have like, missing out syndrome. And and to be seen because you also go to network. And what we're suggesting here is, look, you are in your own process. You get to explore and grieve and accept until you become and who you want to be, how you want to show up, and what parts you're accepting. That's part of the grief process for all of us. Um,
Yeah.
and then finding what Robert's suggesting is finding your own people to build community, even when we go to those events, so that they can help you co-regulate, help you
Yeah.
name a lot of the times what is happening for you, help you advocate for change. When you two were talking, I was listening to a book author because I'm a bookworm, so I like to go to not only read, but like I follow them. That sounds like stalking, but I go to events where they're presenting their
We call it
material.
fangirling. It's okay.
But he was saying that he was hopeful for the new generation, and that brought me hope. So I want
Mhm.
to name that. He says, the new generation, we tend to dismiss them because they're bringing all these new ideas and acceptance. And it's
Yeah.
as the adults who are rejecting it because we are regressing to old patterns
Mhm.
of systems, of expectations. So he said, we have to be patient because it's this new cohort who's going to come and change things. Right.
Eh,
And that gave me hope that
yes.
not just the idea from like the queer community who came and introduced us to pronouns, I get to ask you, from diversity from an ethnicity point of view, which is saying we are here and we don't want to deny this part anymore.
Yeah.
The neurodiversity video, which is like I went too fast, and with my accent, I was like, oh, got it. But neurodivergent the community, which is also saying we are here, and these are the things that we need. And we need that, right? So what is it that we need to do as presenters to be in community with the participants who are taking in? How are we informing them and empowering them to advocate for themselves? And then when we have privileges, with the three of us have, how are we advocating for this change in the system
Mhm.
that we are? Right? Like, what else can we do to help the new cohort that is coming in not have a hard time like we did?
Yeah. I mean, that's what we would hope for, right? that it keeps growing and it keeps getting better
Yeah.
and it keeps going the right direction. And I think for neurodivergent people, there's always this place of strong awareness of yourself
Yeah.
in terms of your system. And like, I think you guys have talked about this before because it was created by a person with chronic illness, but spoon theory,
Yep.
and like, so how much, how much can I give in this moment, in this space, and how many spoons do I have? And
Yeah.
that's something that neurodivergent people really have to be aware of.
Yeah.
Because our system can get bombarded and just turn us into a place where we're in a type of burnout, but we really cannot manifest, even though our cognitive brain, our intellect says we know we should be doing this, we cannot actually do it.
Yeah.
And I think about that. I was just in a conversation with somebody about this, about advocacy, because advocacy takes a lot of spoons. And so I am always in this place of trying to figure out, where and how and when, balancing it with not bottoming myself out,
Yeah.
right, with the spoons. And I think sometimes the relentless and repetitive, like I have said the same thing in the same way, maybe even to the same group of people or the same system. And I mean, my spoons are gone just from sometimes that process in trying to advocate for change. But I'm not going to stop. It's just, it's an awareness. And I say that to not just myself, but anybody listening who's neurodivergent, who's trying to maybe move forward in educating people, increasing awareness, increasing acceptance, that don't forget to take care of yourself, because that's a real part of this. Yeah. And you don't want to get to a place where now you just can't do anything. And it can happen easily. The adult world sometimes more autonomy, which is nice. Yeah. I always think about our poor neurodivergent kids who rarely get any autonomy and are just put into environments where their system is bombarded in a non-friendly way in terms of their neurodivergence and how hard it is. That's why so many of them get dysregulated. That's why you do that, because they can only take so much and the system can take so much. And it's just a reality for us as neurodivergent people until we get systems, especially big systems, that we can walk into. And it's like, wow, this isn't taking anything from me. Yeah. I can just kind of be here. We're not there yet. Yeah. And so it is important for, neurodiversity affirming care for you yourself, the neurodivergent person, would be to recognize that and what it looks like for you. Do what you can. Don't feel bad about what you can't do. Yeah. Right? Because you're in the long race here, yes, not the short sprint, right? We need you in the game for the next several years, not just this month or this week. Right?
No, I love that. I do. And, I think, something that Liliana and I have talked about a couple of times with some of our guests is just this disconnect. We're in a field where like all parts are welcome. We're in a field of like, set those boundaries for yourself. And then there's this disconnect for us doing that for our clients, then to like professional regulatory boards and organizations doing that for us professionals. We don't get that same reciprocity, leaving us in this weird limbo system, right? Where we're pouring out our cup, but our cup's not being refilled yes, by those other systems. Would you say that you're also seeing that?
I've always saw that. And I've always thought that we were way too medical model focused.
Same.
I think people in the medical field are too medical model focused.
Yes.
And I I've always had this thought in my head that pops up, especially when I'm renewing a license or something. There's a requirement for an ethics class, there's a requirement for a suicide course, which are all very important. Absolutely. I don't mind that. But I always think, one day, I'm going to be very happy because I'm going to see there's a requirement for a self-care course.
Mhm.
That just what you were saying, that the organization, the board has put out, we recognize it's important that you're taking care of yourself. And
Yes.
just by even requiring a training to renew is communicating that message. Maybe we'll see that one day.
We will copy our friends in Europe. Like we have this definition, right? But in Europe, think about how many countries they said after five, you will no longer be contacting your employees. And if you do, we're going to fine you. And we're going to give you this time off because you are required to go and recharge. And in that time off, you
Yes.
will not check email from work. Like it's policies that they have.
Yes.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, please, same as everyone else, I have considered moving again. Uh, because I'm like, that is healthy
Yeah.
versus me that I'm in a power of at a space of supervising others. I'm realizing that they're working in systems where they are being abused. If you're working towards licensure, they dictate how many clients, they dictate your time off, they tell you when to answer the phone, they tell you
Yeah.
those are the things, and I'm like, this is not okay. And then we also move into the idea of when we say like self-care. I was like, what does that mean? Because in Colorado, we do have to fill up a form for self-care. I
You
mean, my
do.
hand looks so nice.
Oh, I
But
did not know this.
do I follow it? No,
Right. Right.
none
At
of
least
us do.
But at least the system is saying we want you to be aware of that, which is a step forward. I mean, New Mexico certainly does not have that.
We don't either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my other credentialing boards don't have that as a requirement.
Hold on. But even when you said ethics, and I was like, okay, I'll bite. What kind of ethics? Because ethics is such a big
Yeah.
word that everyone use, and I was like, well, is it clinical ethics? Is it self-care ethics? Is it private practice ethics? Is it diversity? Like, what kind of ethics? So now when anyone calls me and says, can you do ethics? I'll be like, what kind of ethics? It's so
Yeah.
limited to.
Yeah. Well, and
Absolutely.
I will say, I mean, I know some regulatory boards that we are all a part of, right? Like neurodiversity is considered like it does complete like the cultural subset of requirements. So that's I feel like a step in the right direction.
But then they put
Um,
us all in one bucket.
they do. But I'm thinking like, so it's fall when we're recording this.
Okay.
We're getting ready to go take my kids to the little pumpkin patch corn maze thing that happens in our town. They they will provide if you need it, this end like Meow Wolf up in Albuquerque, they have like a sensory bag that you can borrow that has like fidgets and earplugs and like dark sunglasses that you can borrow for your experience there to help. It's just an offering, right, to help regulate and acknowledge that you may have a different need.
Mhm.
Um, what's it going to take for us to get that at professional conferences?
And you said it, I was like, am I gonna get headphones? Because for me, it's sound, by the way. It's just
Yeah.
too much for me. I get so dysregulated. And it will be lovely, right? I just want you to know, Robert and Maria, in here, like my kids, I don't know if they play soccer, but we are season holders. Do not call me up for tickets. We're season holders for the Rapids. They actually have an area for if you have sensory issues, like to go in there. But guess what's happening now? Kids are going in and playing there, so I cannot use it
Mhm.
because
Yes.
the public is not educated in regards to who needs it.
Yeah.
Um, so there's more entities trying to do good things. It's also being misused because there's not a lot of education for the public. But
Yeah.
conferences, mental health conferences, for me is like, how come you're not thinking of this?
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting to see like what the changes in the growth looks like, right? To be around long enough to have a perspective. And I do appreciate all the things I run into because at least I know like nothing was happening when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that some of it isn't quite being done right. And I guess in my head, I think of, well, it's, I said this to Marshall once, Marshall Laus, who you referenced earlier. I'm like, neurodiversity, the paradigm, the movement, it's sort of like if you were in the ocean by the Titanic. And if you ever had this experience when you're swimming in water, you can't touch the ground. It's sort of like you've got your hands up against the Titanic and you're trying to push it while you're swimming.
Yeah.
Like it's very challenging to get solid in place change done, but it does happen. It just happens very slowly in terms of, I think, what we would want to see.
Yeah.
And then it just speaks more to why we're talking about this right now and why we're doing what we're doing, because it's so important that this keeps happening and it keeps being done better. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that grow a lot, but there's no way, but I don't want to be satisfied. Right.
Right.
I don't want to be satisfied just with growth or something that's sort of like an approximate of what we're going for. So we keep advocating and working and talking about it, doing what you guys did. I mean, one of the things I loved about your podcast when I went and looked at it was how much time that you're devoting to diversity needs. And I'm like, that's great. I mean, we just need more of this because it is so vast and wide. Even neurodivergence. I mean, I couldn't sit here and represent all neurodivergence.
Right.
There's just this commitment, the cultural humility philosophy, right? There's just this commitment to never stop learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that because I think that really is accurate.
Mm-hmm. Love this.
I mean, how can it not be when we have continuous information and technology advancements, right? Like we're always going to be given the opportunity to take in new information. When we decide not to do that and reject it, right? That's when we get stuck in these systems that are broken and don't work. And it's like, well, it's always been this way or whatever the old adage is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's part of the process. And thank you. I mean, that's part and point, like the whole point of this podcast was Liliana and I were like having these conversations with people going, more people need to hear this. More people need to know that they're not alone in this. More people, this needs to be a louder conversation. Not that we have, a following that's going to like, march the Capitol Hill or anything quite yet.
That's
you never know.
goal.
You
That's
never know. Yeah.
We got to start somewhere, right? And so
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And I know we're probably getting ready to wrap up because Liliana's making that face at me. So before we walk away, do you have like a top like tip or like self-care moment for someone who might be listening going like this is hard to navigate these systems, being a neurodivergent provider? You said find a community.
Yeah.
What's maybe one other thing that they could do or that you have found helpful?
I would say, seek out, try to create, work toward, put the time into to get autonomy, because I think autonomy is a neurodivergent adult's best friend. And don't feel guilty for that. Don't feel like it's frivolous. If you don't have it already, find the places where you can get it, because I think the more autonomy you can have, it just makes it so much easier than to take care of yourself and to be in a good spoon place, to be fully activated when you're activated. And it just helps you create that kind of balance that you need as you go from day to day, week to week. That's going to be easier or harder for different people. I think your task is just to find what you can right now in terms of really striving for where can I and how can I become more autonomous? And remember the value you bring.
Yeah.
You know, there is a benefit of being a neurodivergent mental health professional in working with neurodivergent clients. There's a value there. We have people call our clinic all the time seeking a neurodiversity affirming and a fellow neurodivergent therapist. And so also just remember the value that you bring.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That
I love
speaks to
that.
all the diversity groups that we're trying to get here, right? Which is, we exist. We exist. We're out there. Come, so that you don't have to describe, so that you don't have to explain, so it just
Yeah.
becomes a natural conversation, not only because of what we know as professionals, but because of the shared experience.
Yeah. Well, and claim our diversity as our superpower, right? Like that's what I'm hearing from you is like it can be your superpower if we really learn to understand it and embrace it and lean into it.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you, Robert. I'm hoping that you come back. I'm hoping that we didn't scare you.
Yeah.
That you come back and talk more because we need voices like yours in order to say there's so many topics that we can cover, and there's space for you as we're
Yes.
changing the narrative of what does it mean, and that you don't have to go hide.
Yes. Listen, I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Thank you to our listeners. We'll see you next time.
Till next time. Bye, guys.
Thank you for joining us on the Heroes Welcome podcast. We hope you found inspiration, insight, and maybe, just maybe, a little fun along the way. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your fellow healers. Until next time, stay curious, stay playful,